When we look at the tarot as an actual story, it can be referred to as the Fool's Journey, and so the character of the Fool actually sets out on a literal journey to discover the universe and to discover himself as well. And all the other cards in the Major Arcana will be the characters and the concepts of which he encounters on this journey through the universe. By understanding the story, we can understand more about how to relate to these cards in our own readings, and also to help us also to understand ourselves and with it the universe. This is what's called the great work, or as above so below, the microcosm and the macrocosm. All of these type of ideas is about when you understand one, you understand the other. So when we figure out something about how the universe behaves, that's true for us as well. And when we figure out something about how we behave, then that may be also true for the universe. And so the Fool's Journey begins with, of course, the Fool. This is number 0. It's neither a positive or a negative in terms of numbers. It could be almost in the centre in some regard, or the state of nothing, that being no thing, something of which has not yet manifested, of which contains within it all of the potential for the actual journey to follow. And a lot of Fool cards actually show the Fool going on an actual journey. So the typical Fool, he's going off towards a precipice, and there's this dog of which appears to be grabbing at him and perhaps trying to pull him back, and we'll come back to that shortly. The Thoth Fool shows the Fool literally bounding forth, excited to set off on this brand new journey. It looks like he's actually coming out of the card towards us. He's so excited he's literally burst out from the card itself. Now I'm calling the Fool he. The Fool generally is an androgynous character. A lot of Fools, some are more male or female looking than others. It doesn't really matter, because the Fool is actually us. And so a simple way of looking at it within today's kind of idea is that the Fool is the protagonist of the story. The Fool is the playable character of whom we are going to take control of to go through this journey. And so it's androgynous because it can be any of us and all of us at the same time. And so we are asked to identify with the character of the Fool for this journey to come. And so the first thing we do really is we have to allow ourselves to become aware of our foolishness, our ignorance in some regards. You could say the Fool sets off on the journey because only one of whom doesn't know about the universe would set off like this, just walking off towards the end of the cliff, all the hazards and the dangers and the death. It's like saying, would you be born into the world if you knew of all the misery of which was in there? We actually have to allow ourselves to look at the world around us and say, well, we don't know. We are genuinely the Fool. We have to allow ourselves, it's quite difficult for some people, to just accept that we don't actually know who we are or where we've come from. We have no idea where our wonderful world that we live on has actually come from, or the universe. We don't even know what the universe is, or even if it is. We are the Fool. We are blissfully ignorant, and we're setting off on a journey to try to understand it, and perhaps we'll just end up back where we've started, which is again the 0 in the actual Fool. So the Fool's journey really does begin with taking that single step, and the Fool is the Hebrew character of Aleph, of which is the first letter, of course, of the Hebrew alphabet, and oddly enough it's also a silent letter, and so it's usually placed with other letters to create words, but Aleph is not actually heard. And so this may represent, of course, silence and soundlessness, and so it's like the very beginning of something before it's actually manifested enough to make a noise or to have a form. It's the world being void and without form, which we've heard before. It's also, this letter Aleph, said to represent the ox, or sometimes the ox plough, which of course takes us back to the earliest days of farming and of life on the earth, but metaphysically, it's a large beast, of course, of the fields of the earth. And so if it's of the earth, it's of Malkuth on the Tree of Life, which is the sphere of kingdom, manifested reality. And yet, because it's come down into manifestation, it contains within it spirit to animate it, which is Kether on the top of the Tree of Life. And so this is what we see with the Fool. We're setting off on a physical journey, but we're not just going to get physical results or lessons from it. It's also a spiritual journey, and it will teach us about our physical self and how to react and work in the physical world, and also what it all means, and potentially even where it all comes from. Because when we understand that something about ourselves, we understand something about the nature of our universe. And so at the very beginning here, perhaps the Fool just setting out, we've accepted our ignorance of everything. We have to look at it like a very childlike, very simple way. Our physical bodies have a beginning, and so perhaps the universe also has a beginning. But just like that ox contains within it the spirit of Kether, and it comes down into Malkuth, the physical bodies are only the vehicle. And so the Fool protagonist that we take control of is a surrogate vehicle that we use for this Fool's Journey tarot story. So our physical vehicles, we understand them to have a beginning because they get born. They get born into the physical world as a baby, and of course they have an end as well. But what animates the body, what makes it move, what makes it think, what makes it able to click on this video and click off it again, is at this point, of course, still a profound mystery. And yet, if our vehicles have a beginning, perhaps so too does the universe, the earth, the everything that is, must also have a beginning. It's also interesting of looking at the body as the vehicle for the story. It's like a motorway, or a train track. If you want to drive on a motorway, you have to get inside a car in order to drive it. If you want to go on a train track, you have to get inside a train for it to travel along its track. And when the journey reaches its end, you get out of that vehicle. And so we seem to have entered the vehicle to start the journey. And of course at this point it hasn't even started, and yet straight away we can see a great mystery in the very beginnings, that number 0, which, as well as neither positive or negative, could be a singularity, could be a point of where everything begins, the point of birth, not just of our bodies, but perhaps even of everything. A point where everything was together, and then it explodes, and literally like the thoth Fool, bounds forth, starting its journey outwards, with a great and innocent enthusiasm. And yet we're not completely alone, because we have this dog with us, and the dog isn't on every Fool card, but it's a very popular image on the Fool, and it seems to be almost dragging him back, as if it's saying, now hey, come on, there's some danger laying that way, you could fall off the cliff. And so the dog is a constant companion that we're going to take with us on this journey, and it's obviously an animal, and it represents, in some regards, an intuitive warning, and it's also that voice, that sense of the observer, of which we will carry with us on this journey. We're never truly alone, of course. We always have an internal monologue and a sense of presence, of consciousness with us, of which will try to bring us back. And if we look at the idea of thelema and will, do as thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. You can go on any path that you want, but some of them will lead you in the right way, so to speak, or to the path of true will, and some of them will lead you completely off course. You may find that there's a little piece of you of which is always loyal to your highest ideals, and of which will always guide you like a spiritual sat-nav back towards that right path. And so, when you go off on the wrong path, it barks at you and claws at you, and that's the dog. And so that's always going to be with us as both a companion, a warning, and perhaps just an emphasis at this stage as well of the playful innocence of the Fool. We don't know anything about the universe at all. Let's go out and see what it's all about. Instead of saying, as we will later in the story, this is how it is and I know it is, and don't let anybody tell me otherwise. That's not really how we're going to learn anything at all. In fact, if we are going to learn anything at all, then we have to be willing to not only heed these warnings and to understand that there will be dangers, but to actually get started on the journey in the first place. And so we're going to put that foot forward and literally start the Fool's Journey into the Major Arcana.